July 31st, 2019. It was very, very tough on my family. My siblings, we all gathered around his hospital bed, which was in his house, in his bedroom. And we cried and we mourned. And he passed away at about 11:25 and that night. And we cried and we mourned. And one of my sisters screamed out and begged him to come back. And the other one, she got real mad and she was like, "You stop that. We're people of dignity." And it was actually a kind of a funny scene. While we were crying, it was kind of a funny scene because the the younger sister became the older sister and put us all back in line. And then after that was done, and we cried for a little while, I called everyone together, and we prayed, and we thanked God for his life. And we cried, and we cried more, and we cried more. And a few days later, we had this homegoing service, and it was really, really, really tough, but we made it. That being said, every year since then, in November, his birthday is November 17th, we celebrate his birthday the third Sunday of November with having what we call Tracksuit Sunday. The last 3 or 4 months before he had a stroke and went down, he wore a tracksuit every single day. Y'all hear me? Every single day. And so we put on tracksuits on the third Sunday of November to celebrate his birthday, as well as celebrate his legacy, being the bishop of our church and our chief apostle. And we celebrate him on that day. We sing his songs. And what happens is everybody cries. Everybody goes into grief. And they begin to cry, and we begin to mourn while we're celebrating him. Everybody cries, and this year it was kind of I guess I could say it was a little funny because we were singing and people were celebrating and shouting. We're singing his songs. He would have a litany of songs that he would sing on Sundays and whenever he would have the energy to, and so we began to sing his songs this year, celebrating his life and legacy. And the church wiped itself out. People began to cry everywhere, and one group was over here huddled together crying. They were singing and crying and laughing and smiling and crying, and they were crying as if, and I would say this is the first year I didn't bust out in tears. We were crying as if Bishop had just went on to be with the Lord. And I mean, they were crying on this side, and they were hugging and singing and crying. Then they went to the other side, they were hugging and singing and crying, and it was just busting out all over the room. And me, I'm relentless. I would just not stop until everyone got it out. Why? Because I believe grief is healthy. I believe remembering is healthy. I believe that crying over your loved ones is healthy, even if it's years later. I believe that grief is natural. I kind of believe if you don't grieve, you're either lying to yourself or you may not be human, because grief is a natural phenomenon. If you lose something, you grieve over it. There are stages in grief, and if you lose your car, you grieve over it. If your dog passes away, you grieve over it. My father, as I like to say, he was received by Jesus, and even though now he's with Jesus, we grieved over him, and we yet grieve over him. And I learned some things during that transition. Number one, I learned that grief is different for everyone that you lose, and it's different for every individual person. My brother Anton Ray was murdered here in the city of Sacramento in 2010, December 20th, 2010, and it wrecked our family. I mean, it wrecked our family. We were so broken. We were so hurt. And my mother and myself and my youngest brother Christopher, my youngest brother Christopher, Anton was the youngest. He was 20 at the time. We had to identify his body. We went into the room to identify him. He was laying on the table, and there was a police officer there, and we could only get right inside and stand right by the door. The police was there because it was an active crime. He was an active crime scene. And as we were standing there, we said it's him. But we didn't want to leave because he didn't look like he was gone. He just looked like he was asleep. Anton was a big old teddy bear. He just looked like he was asleep. But if you peered over to the other side, you could see that the sheet was stuck to his neck, and there was a blood spot because that's where he was shot at, right there in his neck. That was a different kind of grief. We came out of the room where we were singing him. We came back out where the family was. And as soon as we busted the door, my mom fell on the floor. My brother Chris ran one way, and I fell another way. And we were all broken and so very hurt. When my father got there, I fell apart all over again because that was my one. When I saw him walk into the hospital, I fell apart all over again because my brother was gone. But the person who I relied on the most, he was coming in to check on us, and I fell apart all over again. I reconciled in myself that was the most hurt I could ever feel in my life until my daddy was received by Jesus. About 9 years later, And then I recognize that grief is different for everybody. And it's a different kind of grief. No matter who or what it is that you lose, it's a different kind of grief. And I realized going through that moment when my brother passed away and was received by Jesus as well, I went to go pick up my baby, Maila. She was just a toddler there. She was 2 years old then. I went to pick her up, and my daughter's grandmother that night, she hugged me, she held me, and she told me something. She said, Yardley, while she was holding me, and I began to break again. She said, Yardley, Miss Glenda, she said, Yardley, grief is a lifetime. My brother was killed in Vietnam, and I still cry for him. And at that moment, I realized, and I want to share with you, that grief is a lifetime. Grief doesn't end because the moment is over. And you have to realize that grief may end for other people. But when it's your loved one, when it's someone that you grew up with, someone that you lived with, when it's someone that you've been through trials and tribulations with, the grief doesn't end. You just keep going. It never ends. You carry it with you because you have questions that you want to have answers to. You still have conversations that you wanted to have. You thought you still had more time, but they left sooner than you thought. Now, I don't believe in gone too soon because I believe that God has a specific time for all of us. But if you believe that, then you'll be like, gone too soon. I just say that I didn't get out everything that I wanted to, or if I could have, or there were some things that I was not supposed to get out with them. And I don't know what your situation is, but my belief is that part of your grief is because there was more that you wanted, and part of our grief is selfish, but that's okay. Because God made us the way that he made us. And so grief's for a lifetime. But then I learned something else I want to share with you. And that's this. Do not allow anyone nor yourself to stifle your grief. What are you saying, Yardley? Don't be strong for anybody. You don't have to be strong for anyone. I know we have this thing, especially as African Americans, where I got to be strong for my mom. I don't have to be strong. I'm grieving and she's grieving. If I stifle my grief now trying to be strong for my kids, no, they were grieving for my father as their grandfather. I was grieving for him as a son. They were grieving as grandchildren. And I couldn't steal their grief, but I can't let them steal mine, and neither could I stifle mine or allow them not to feel how they felt trying to be strong for me. Don't be strong for anybody. That's what I'm saying. Stop being strong for people. Stop holding back how you feel. Because you not crying isn't going to help your mother anymore. When my brother Anton died, I'm sorry, my family was different. We all just sat, we went to my sister Vanessa's house, my oldest sister Vanessa's house, and we would all get there and we'd all just bust out crying. My mom was crying. That was her baby. She was crying, and she cried, and we cried, and we cried, and she cried. And we'd be sitting there talking about something, and one person started crying, then the whole room, it's 7 of us, y'all, 7 brothers and sisters, Vanessa, Veronica, Ariam, Sharice, Yardley, Isaac, and Christopher, and then Anton went home to be with the Lord, y'all. We would just bust out crying, and we didn't care who did cry or who didn't cry, because we couldn't allow our grief to be stifled, and we didn't have room or space to be strong because we were all broken. Same thing happened when my father died 9 years later, 3 years ago now. We would just bust out crying, not worried about, oh, well, they're not crying. Well, if you don't want to cry, don't. You go home. Don't, because I feel the way I feel, and I'm not going to be strong for you. I'm not asking you to be strong for me. So that's the second thing I learned about grief is don't be strong. But I learned something else about grief, and that was this: no one is or was responsible for my grief or our grief, or is responsible for your grief. No one is responsible for how you grieve or your grieving process or what you're grieving. What are you saying? What are you trying to say? Please, when you're grieving, that's not the space for you to tell people what to do about their grief or get them told about what they should be doing. Can I say this? Just because you lose your mom, don't tell me to call my mom. Me and my mom may not have a great relationship, and don't tell me, oh, you're going to feel bad about it. I'm not going to feel bad about it. I remember when my father was in the care home, and one of my sisters got upset because we weren't all going to see him every single day. But I didn't feel the need to go see him every single day because for 5 years leading up to that moment, I had spent almost every single day with him. She, now no disrespect, but she was trying to reclaim the years. They hadn't had a great relationship, and she was trying, and it had gotten better, but there were so many years lost between them. She was using her time trying to reclaim the years, and in her trying to reclaim the years, she became frustrated with us who had had the years with him. And she was making us responsible because of how she felt. Don't make me respond. Don't tell me to call my mom. Call your dad. No. That's your space of grief. You just grieve the way you need to grieve, but don't put me in a space where I feel like I have to go hug your kids closer. I hug my kids every day. My baby girl Mila's in Hawaii right now. I just got off the phone with her. I've been talking to her like 4 or 5 times a day, every day since she's been gone. And I talk to her every day, 4 or 5 times a day. So I don't have to do extra stuff because you didn't do it. Just because you didn't take advantage of your moment doesn't mean that I'm not taking advantage of mine while I have time. But that was a third thing I learned, but I learned another thing, and that is please allow people to grieve the way they grieve. Now you may not like the way people grieve. You may not agree with people grieving publicly on social media. Just scroll past it. You may not agree with people crying loud and people being vociferous in their grief. Then don't come around. But please allow people to grieve the way that they grieve, because when it's your turn, you're going to need people to allow you to grieve the way that you need to grieve. When my brother passed away and he was transitioning and went home to be with Jesus, when he was received by Jesus, as I like to say, there was a partner or a member at that time of our church. My sister had posted on social media, and she was posting over and over again because actually she was closer to him than the rest of us. We're all close, but they had a closer relationship than the rest of us, with no shade on anybody. And the grief with her was really strong. And one of the members of our church had posted on her post and said to her, "I'll be glad when the Griffin children move on." I'll be glad when the Griffin children move on. And so it alerted me. I may have been wrong, but I'm a pastor, and I was a pastor of the church at that time. And it alerted me to say something. Well, I wasn't quite pastoring quite yet, but I knew I was going to be pastoring in just a few months after that. It alerted me to say something, and I said these words, just wait until it's your turn, and then you'll know how it feels, and you'll leave people alone. And it wasn't even 6 months later that we were at the hospital, and you know what happened. Let people grieve the way they grieve, because you never know when it's your turn and how you're going to grieve. If you don't like it that they post on social media every day, just scroll past it. They may be overdoing it, but you're not the counselor. They may need some real, actual counseling. Let them grieve the way they grieve. But that brings me to the 5th point. While allowing people to grieve and allowing you to grieve the way that you grieve, hear me. Number 5, public grief can produce public criticisms. So those of us who grieve publicly, we also have to understand and not beat people up. Public grief can and will produce public criticisms. Yeah. It will produce that. Can I tell you something personal about me? One of the things about me, I don't mind showing people my grief, and it's not always tears, but it's sometimes me just talking about my father and my brother, just talking about them, and sometimes people don't know our full relationship with me and my father. And so they'll say certain things if I post a picture of him, or if I say I miss him, or if I do certain things, or when I post an accomplishment, they'll say something like, because my grief is weird, they'll say something like, your dad would be so proud of you. Now, people don't know, well, most people don't know, but that drives me crazy. When I accomplish something, it's a part of my grief when people tell me that your dad would be so proud of you. Can I tell y'all a secret? This ain't church. This is my personal stuff. Can I tell y'all a secret? Number one, no, that's not true, because my father rarely ever told his children that he was actually proud of us. He would tell other people, but he wouldn't ready tell us. Another thing is, me and my father had this thing where, and you can say what you want, but it's my life, and I know my own life. Me and my father, we had this thing where my father wouldn't really be proud of me until actually other people were really lauding me and telling me how great I was. Then all of a sudden, he jumped on the bandwagon. But then another reason is, one reason I don't like it is because my father, a lot of times, he took credit for the good stuff I did. Whenever I do something good, he take all the credit. Whenever I do something bad, he would say it's that Cooper side. But anything I did that was great, he would take all the credit and make people feel like he was the originator of it all, when he had nothing to do with it. When I started pastoring, whenever it was my Shepherd's Day, his picture was always on my flyer. Now he's the bishop, but come on, man. You may feel how you feel, but come on, man. It's my time to shine, bro. When I first started singing out, and he told me that it wasn't going to work. And then when it started working, he was going around telling people, yeah, he learned it in church. And yeah, I told you to tell me anything. And so therefore, part of my grief is frustrating with him. And you got to know, sometimes grief is frustrating, because people are saying he'd be so proud when I know he wouldn't. Or he would be proud until other people said so, or until actually it began to work, and then he'd believe in it. That's my truth but I have to understand that my public grief brings about public criticism. So I have to know that if I grieve publicly, people may say something. And so on one end, that it may not be fair for them to say it, but another end, I'm putting myself out there for them to have things to say. And if I'm going to grieve publicly, then I have to be understanding of the fact that people are going to have things to say about it. I have two more, and number 6 is I want to talk to those people who are out there, who are watching people grieve. Stop saying stuff. Stop quoting scriptures to people. Because I believe God, but I'm hurting right now. Stop telling people it's going to be okay, because it's not. It's not. The only thing that's going to make it okay is if I get back what I lost. Stop telling people it was their time, because no matter how long it's been, if it was your grandmother or your grandfather, well, it was their time and they lived a long life. Yeah, but they knew what it was like to live without me. I never knew a day without them. My grandmother may have been 92, but I don't know a day without her. So just stop just saying stuff that you think makes sense, but it really doesn't, because it can hurt people even more. Number 7, your prophetic word isn't going to make me feel better. Your song isn't going to heal me. Your hug isn't going to make me feel better. Matter of fact, I may not want you to hug me, because your hug isn't going to stop my tears. Your hug isn't going to fix my tears. Your prophetic word of God took him because he wanted greater, that's not going to make me feel better. That's not going to make the grieving person feel better. The only thing that's going to make me feel better is if I get back what I lost. And so I will love and I'll live. I won't feel better, but I'll learn to live without them. And that's how I'll grieve. I won't cry all the time after a while, but I won't stop crying. I won't hurt all the time, but I won't stop hurting. There'll be weeks where I don't feel anything, and then a song will come on the radio. I'll see a picture, maybe not of them, but of something else. I'll have a friend that says something, and it'll bring me all the way back. And my heart will feel broken again like the first day when I found out they left. So, ladies and gentlemen, grief is healthy. I want you to grieve. I want you to cry. I want you to feel it. And I want you to be okay feeling how you feel when you feel it. So grieve, feel, do you. I gotta go. Yardley Griffin, Yardley Talks. If you enjoyed what you saw and you like this content, you like this platform, do me a favor. Go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube, Yardley Griffin TV. Subscribe to our TikTok, Yardley Griffin TV. Follow our Facebook, Yardley Griffin. You can even send the Cashapp Yardley Griffin. Let's get this thing in. Let's subscribe. Let's build. Let's create more content together so we can help bless. We can help people. We can bless people. We can change lives. And we can do this thing. Yardley Talks. As always, I gotta go. Peace.